Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Ambyes and I am currently writing a novel, and I thought I would include you guys in on how I use my template and offer you guys a link to the template in my bio. So if you check down in the description, you'll see it, but basically here is what we made last week. We made a character mood board, and now we are going to create the story that goes along with that mood board using a template that I've created, and I hope you guys will enjoy this. So let's get started. To begin with, I actually filled out the tropes for what I thought my book would have, and I kind of went for a combination of media that I already enjoyed, but it's included in the template in case you're not sure what tropes are or how to find them. TV tropes is a great place to look at media you already know and love and see kind of what are they famous for. I had some weird suggestions in my search box. A couple I knew, but a couple of those suggestions I'm not even sure when I looked those up, so who knows. Death Stranding is a game that I really enjoy and has some characters I really like, so I started out there just to see what kind of tropes that the game had overall, and then dug in a little deeper. If this is your first time watching, basically these are real-time create your novel with me videos that show just how long it can take to create a mood board and how to do it. This one, of course, is how to plot your novel. So currently I am looking at Mads Mikkelsen's TV tropes profile and kind of curiously wondering why he has the caption of "I am no longer mentally ill" under his photo. And I'm just trying to figure out what the meme is here. So sometimes you will find things like that I think are just it's kind of like a Wikipedia where other people can edit it, so you will find some strange things. I'm also just realizing that Mads Mikkelsen he was born in the 60s. I don't know why I thought he was younger than that. I guess because he just looks so well for his age. But moving on from my obsession with his beautiful face. So once I have kind of considered some TV tropes, I go ahead and paste them in. I had actually put some in the template based on the story already, so at this point I'm just pasting those in because I've already done some of the background work for this when I made this template. So these are some of the tropes that I felt would fit well in my novel. And I like the fact that this is a drop-down menu, so once you've filled in your tropes, you can actually collapse it and it won't be in your way when you begin plotting or filling in other categories. I deleted out a couple things that I didn't really think made sense or didn't really need to be there. For one, the yearning trope didn't actually come from TV tropes or anything like that. It's actually from a fan fiction that I read recently that was a really neat like fairy tale based story, and there was a scene in there that I just thought was so great, and it reminded me why I love romance novels. It is the yearning, the wanting what you can't have or believing that you can't have it. And so I knew that I wanted that to stay. So I deleted out the description part because this isn't really about Hannibal or Will, and this is just about keeping the yearning trope because this is a totally different story, regardless of whether or not maybe the actors or characters resemble them. The personalities of these characters are very different. And I love yearning in a romance book, but I also enjoy the bridal carry, foils for one another, being opposites, the birds of a feather, where they really aren't the same person, but something within them has them getting along because maybe they see in each other similarities in that maybe they are both isolated or they are both outsiders, but they're not necessarily birds of a feather in the fact that they are alike. Bookending is a really interesting trope that I am really interested in putting into my writing, and it is where what starts a story also ends a story, or it's basically like a cyclical nature. And so perhaps a character says something at the beginning of the story and then says the same thing at the end, but it has a different meaning now that they have grown. And I just find that really nice because often whenever we are engaging with media, we find ourselves kind of quoting things and there being, popular references. Pride and Prejudice has, ardently. Everyone knows when you hear ardently, if you're part of the Pride and Prejudice community, you're like, oh, I know that part. And so even just singular words, if they are, repeated throughout, become almost like a motif and just become part of the story. And so I want to make sure I include something about like the book ending. Now, for my main characters, I'm including the main couples, which would be Grim and Leif and Allison and Darcy. And I'm also including some minor characters such as like parental figures. Now, on top of this, there are some details that I particularly needed to know in order to engage with my story in the best way. You may not need these details, but you have the opportunity to place them here if you want to. For instance, Grimm's background has a lot to do with academia and him going into that profession, and so I felt like I needed to know when he graduated high school and college and when he was getting his PhD. However, for Allison, that's not a big part of her arc, and so it's less important that I know every age for her. And for Leif, it's even less important because his personality isn't really based on academia at all. And then for Darcy, it's a really similar thing. I really just needed a ballpark age for them, and not so much knowing like defined finite details. So, whatever works for your story best in plotting your characters. Now, I have character building templates if you have no idea how to write your characters that you can, grab on Etsy. They're $3 or $4 and you can fill in your character's information, and it kind of asks you questions like how old are they, what are their flaws, what do they want, but it also has some deeper questions like do they have any prejudices, or what is their arc going to look like. And I really want to create an arc worksheet that helps you work through the different chapters and what characters should be going through. But for what we're doing today, I just wanted the basics because this is really supposed to be a big picture, bird's eye view of the novel so that you can easily click in and be like, oh, those are my characters, those are my tropes. Now, at this point, I actually took a break and I came back the next day to fill in the rest of the categories. So what you're seeing right now is just me kind of previewing and then deciding I think I need a break. So again, this was all real time, so I filled out the tropes and the main characters in about 7 minutes and then came back and filled out the rest of the worksheet. The full runtime to get myself a zerodraft and fill out all of the different worksheet areas took about an hour. So if you have an hour of time and a decent idea of what you are trying to create story-wise, I think this will be really easy for you. Moving on to media inspiration, I had a few things that I thought I would like to include. I really enjoyed the characters of A Secret History and kind of not knowing if it was going to be magical realism or not. And then at the end, you never really got an answer, and I thought that was kind of interesting. I liked normal people and the way that it really hyper-focused on two individuals with very little outside subplot. And then, of course, I included a couple more that I just thought maybe had the vibes of the story that I wanted. One thing that I am really struggling with, and I think many people struggle with, is what genre that you're writing in. I know that this story will eventually have magical realism or arcane, occultish ties in the sequel, But the first book really doesn't touch on that. It's really more of a introduction to the characters and the relationships that will be important in the next book. And so while I know that it is new adult, that is not really a recognized category. And so I think it will be adult, or they might even call it young adult, but I would not consider it young adult. So the next thing is figuring out what's that subcategory. So if I'm saying I'm new adult, am I romance? Am I paranormal? Am I horror? Am I this? Am I that? And I'm not really sure, and I didn't want to waste a ton of time researching it because I'm not even sure if that's important to my story right now, as I'm just trying to kind of zero draft out an idea and get kind of like a full vision of the story and not get bogged down or stuck in the plotting. So I kind of put, some question marks, not sure, but I think eventually I'm going to just kind of classify it as like an adventure, or there's like a difference between magical realism and low fantasy. Low fantasy is kind of like this has always been accepted, but we're not going to explain how the magic works. And magical realism is that it is not accepted and it is a strange new thing, and you may or may not explain how it works, but it is not like something the character would be used to. And so I just kind of left that for later because I know that I can come up with that at a later time. It's not crucial to my plotting right now. For the locations in my story, I know that I want it to be heavily in nature. A big thing is that they basically hire a park ranger / tour guide to take them to a park for a week because they've never really been. And so a few places I know really well are the Rocky Mountains and Yellowstone, and so I went ahead and listed those locations, knowing that I'll select something and get the details for it later on. But knowing that that's kind of like the country that I'm in helps. The next thing is there's a custom block that I left that you could just fill in whatever you wanted. And lately I have been thinking of scenes that I would like to have in the story. And for me, the scenes that I know that I want are some scenes where they are playing in the water, maybe doing like, I don't know what they call it. I keep calling it chicken, but it's like when you get on people's shoulders and then you, like, whoever falls wins. I know that I want Leif and Allison to be bonding, and for that to be an issue for Grimm, who has always been Allison's #1 fan. I also would love to have one of the classic romance scenes where Grimm accidentally walks in on Leif in some sort of undressed state and just doesn't know how to handle it, because I think those are so fun. I also know that I need Darcy and Allison bonding very obviously to the reader in the background so that it doesn't come off as strange when they do end up together. I also know that I want nervous Grimm and Leif being an absolute dork, because that's their personalities. And something I didn't include, but that I think I will want in the story eventually, is yearning. I made a big deal about it at the beginning of the video and forgot to write in that I want a scene where they're yearning. There needs to be a moment where they want to kiss or they want to admit their feelings and they do not. So now we're actually into the meat of this worksheet template. Basically, there are plotting methods. There are several, and they're best for different kinds of genres. So the plot grid method is best for mysteries and thrillers, and I've included a database already pre-filled for you to kind of use if you're interested in that. It basically is a timeline by month, and then you can kind of list out chapters and different subplots and keep up with those so that you can drop hints and different things for your story along the way. So that's a really interesting option for those of you who are trying to keep up with the story, but not give too many hints away. I have Save the Cat, which is what I'm actually going to use later on, just because it was the easiest zero draft for me. The way it's set up is that you have your chapters, explanations, and then a zero draft column. For the hero's journey, which is probably the simplest one for fantasy, sci-fi, and mythos, it has kind of like 6 categories for the hero's journey. It explains what that would look like for each genre, and then has a zero draft column over to the right. Freytag's Pyramid is really good for lit fic, historical fiction, and it's very short. It's like 4 categories that you fill in. The Marshall Plan, thrillers, crime, romance, best for pacing and plot beats. It's really short too, and just kind of focuses on plot points and has a zero draft sentence that you can write over there and just try to see it all at once before you break it down into the details. The Fishtian, I think is how you say it, curve is all about conflict. Think of psychological thrillers, horror, drama, and it kind of helps you keep constant crisis throughout the story. And the Dramatica theory, which is actually one that I want to do with this story, but is really difficult for me to understand. And so I've had to do a lot of research on that, is best for having multiple arcs throughout a story and having them all kind of break in different ways. And I think it is best for complex things, political themes. I think it would be really great for those really high fantasy books because you can have political intrigue, your character arc, sub-character arcs, and world arcs all at once. So that is what is available in the template, but I'm actually going to go and create my story now. This might be a good time for you to take a break, get a cup of tea, and get ready because here we go. So for the opening image, it has tips for each of the various genres that I think are kind of the most popular. It explains what an opening image is and gives an example of a story over to the right. So I begin by writing out my opening image and trying to decide what I think is going to be happening and what would be most interesting. Again, this is in real time, so you can actually see the gears churning as I try to decide where does this story start, which is something I always struggle with. I either start too early, and so it is a boring start, or I start too late, and I feel like I haven't built up the characters enough. So, for example, I begin with the characters boarding an airplane, and then realize I have not built anything for our readers to know or understand these characters. And so I back it up to them sneaking out of the house to board the plane. That way we can have family dinner, open up sort of the nuance of these characters, get to know them just a little bit, and be slightly invested in them. Next, it talks about stating the theme. Now, I have these numbered as 1, 2, and 3, but really they're all basically chapter 1. And I think that can be really confusing when you're reading Save the Cat beats or online advice, because what you're reading is that these are all 3 separate things, but what you don't understand sometimes is that they are all within the first 10 pages. So they really are just one chapter altogether. So here, I know that I'm going for a romance sort of arc for our characters, and so I really need for someone to give us the idea that Grimm is not here for love, he does not want love, or that he's not interested, because obviously his character arc is him falling in love, so why isn't he in love already? I start out with Allison making a remark about them seeing couples at the airport, and Grimm kind of being like, I don't really get what the big deal is. Why do you want to, tie yourself down? But in the next 3 and 4, the numbers, I felt conflicted because I know that there are certain beats that I want to hit, but I'm not really sure where to hit them or how to or what order. So for this, it says establish the protagonist's emotional state and relationships for the romance genre. So I'm establishing the world and supporting characters. So here I figured I need to include some of those character issues where their parents really aren't bad people. They just think it would be nice if their kids, fell in love. Because, well, maybe I should preface this. They are not the same parents. It is two families that are very close, and these kids have kind of just been expected that, oh, maybe they'll like each other someday. They're so close. Wouldn't that be so nice? But unfortunately, that creates this sense of like Grimm feeling like he is disappointing them, or that he is just disappointed in general. And so I knew I needed to get those emotions out there so that readers understood where he's starting from. Here in what I'm just going to call chapter 4, because that's the number of this Save the Beat, basically. This beat is number 4. I could not figure out for the catalyst really how to do this, because romance novels are generally dual point of view, but I'm not sure that I want to do a dual point of view. If I do, I think I want only a few points of view from life. Otherwise, I feel like it might bog the reader down or kind of give away plot points that I'm not sure that I want out there yet. So at this point, I kind of write down an idea of what I think I might want, which is that Leif is already in America on sort of a security job or like just a little side thing for his family, a little side hustle. And he basically gets a call because his family are sort of interconnected with Grimm's in like a business sense. They wouldn't know each other, but their families maybe have had work together. And so they basically call Leif and they're like, hey, our kids are in America. Can you get them? And his parents are like, just take the job. It'll be easy money. And of course, Leif at first is thinking they're actually kids. And so he's like all in. And then when he gets there, he basically figures out like these are grown adults. Like they are not children. And like everyone is really overreacting for no reason. And Darcy kind of, at this point, I'm not sure what I have. Should any of Grimm's point of view be here? IDK. I'm going to start filling in the debate portion. And what happens is I figure out, oh, I actually think this chapter 5 beat that I'm filling out should be a part of this number 4 beat. And so what happens is I decide, why would Leif stay? Because that's going to be a question. Like, why would he stay? Why would they let him stay? Why would he not call their parents and get them like taken back home immediately, or have the cops show up? I don't know. And so my thought was, okay, so he thinks they're kids. He shows up. Darcy's like, these are grown people. Like, you're so weird right now. And she basically says, like, if you think they're actually in danger, why don't you just stick around, And for her, it's a way to make sure that she still gets the money that they have said that they will pay her for this trip. And for the plot, it's a way for Leif to become involved with Grimm and Allison in a way that is different than what he was initially basically paid to do, which is bring them back. And this creates a debate, which I think is a better debate than what I had originally thought would go here. And the debate is, will Grimm and Allison continue with their plan with Darcy, or will they go back to the airport with Leif? Now, at this point in the writing process, I haven't had this idea, but after filling out this video, I do think I'm going to edit this portion to where Darcy knows that Leif is there to get them, but that Darcy doesn't tell Grimm and Allison because it's in her best interest that they don't know, because she wants to get paid. And so Grimm and Allison believe that Leif is a friend of Darcy's and that he's just coming along for the ride. And so that would actually make the debate more or less like, do we want this extra person? But also, the vulnerability part of the romance might not be so strong, but I think overall for the plot, it would be better and more of a upset later when they find out that basically he's the one that's kind of tricking them, or like he's the bad guy in a sense. But this also gives us an opportunity for Leif to interact in a way that he's not ever been able to interact before. He isn't there as a guard or a security person, but rather just as a friend, which is like Grimm and Allison, something he hasn't really ever had in his interactions before. This is actually the part where I decide, okay, that debate isn't really a debate. I need to move that up into the catalyst, because the catalyst is, Grimm and Allison having a lot of decisions to make here. And so I figure out pretty quickly what I need to do. And this is so funny because that is exactly how I was feeling. Truly, I am lost, IDK. And to be honest, I don't know if I ever come back and fill that in before the end of the video. I think I do, because I'm just struggling with it. And so if you find yourself in a struggle like that, definitely walk away. I've had this struggle forever, and that's the reason I really pushed through today. I've had the plot line and the plot bunnies for a while, but I have not pushed myself to actually complete a zero draft. And so I was like, even if it sucks, I'm gonna do it. And so I did it. And I think I'm gonna have to change it, because I don't know that it's gonna fit with the fact that they don't know that Leif is is not their friend. So we'll see. But I now have everything kind of filled out for the first 50 pages of the book, which is great. That's a huge success. 50 pages is a lot. So even if they don't know that Leif is the security guard sent to get them, they can still grapple with the decision of their parents calling them, trying to get a hold of them, and having to make the decision that they're going to ignore their parents and they are not coming back home. So I think that alone could be a good enough debate for this portion. Also, Darcy and Allison become closer at this point, and this frustrates Grimm because Allison has been his, beacon of light, his lighthouse, and now Allison is connecting very easily with other people. And so I would like for at this point, and actually if I look right now, I can tell I have it where Leif is finding Darcy at this point. So I've actually already messed up my 4 and 5, so I will need to go back and fix that. But sometimes when you're fighting for your life to plot a novel, like, there are mistakes, but that's an easy one to fix. I just need to kind of edit so that Leif is showing up at the right time. So for my break into 2, this is kind of the fully committing to the adventure part. Darcy gets Leif to come along, and he doesn't make a scene, and this is sort of the part where she's convincing him, I have the money, these guys are adults, just come along with us. And we get a little bit of background into his inner thoughts about the fact that he's unhappy with his life. He doesn't want to go back home. He doesn't enjoy his job. He doesn't like working security. He doesn't like always being in a high-stress situation. And the fact that he's going with them irritates Grimm. And it irritates him even more because Allison really likes Leif. And at this point, we start to see a divide. Grimm starts isolating because he doesn't have Allison there to make up for his bad attitude or to make him feel at home. And so I think there are some slow points, like for instance, this plot beat number 7. It says, a subplot often involving a key relationship, further development of romantic interest. This is basically a driving date in the story, and so I can't decide if I want to include that driving portion in the chapter, or just let the reader imagine that they drove there, or if I should have had the airplane just land in this national park area, or, close to it, so that the drive isn't very long, and so there's not anything that the reader would have missed that was important. because we don't want to make them feel disappointed that they've missed something or some conversation by kind of fast forwarding. This is whenever I feel like the actual romance fun subplot begins, and they arrive to the national park, to the campgrounds, only to find out that there's only one tent, because that's all Darcy brought, because there was only 3 of them. And this is funny to Leif, because he could care less. He's very much, I don't want to say military, but he's of the mind, like, everybody's got bodies, like, I could care less. I just want somewhere to sleep that's comfortable. And then you have Grimm, who's very prim and proper, and is just like, what? Which is funny, because he's the one that signed up for this, but he doesn't think things through all the time. And so he doesn't realize what he's gotten himself into. Allison thinks it's fun, she's super optimistic, and Darcy is kind of like Leif. She doesn't really know why it matters. Like, they've already ran away from home. Like, what were they expecting? It's a national park. They get over that kind of hurdle, and I have some fun and game scenes that I'm really excited to build relationships on. I definitely want them to have, like, swimming or playing in the water scene. I'd love for there to be s'mores. I'd love for Grimm to be Grimm. He's frustrated, he's irritated. Leif keeps trying to be nice to him and be kind to him, and Grimm is just not having it, and it's very much, the patient, nice person, because Leif does want to get along with Grimm and does find him kind of endearing in his bratty ways, and Grimm is just mad. And Allison and Darcy need to be shown in the background getting close, and both of them recognizing that Grimm is mad because he's not number 1, and also because he has a crush and he doesn't realize he has a crush, and that there's some jealousy there. Unfortunately, in the story, Allison and Darcy both decide they want to play matchmaker with Leif, and Leif is a pretty good sport about it. For him, if it works out, that's great. He likes Grimm. And if it doesn't, he doesn't think much about it. Unfortunately, the fact that Darcy and Allison and Leif have kind of formed this little trio is presenting to Grimm as like a betrayal, and that maybe Leif and Allison are becoming romantic, which is funny in retrospect, because we as the reader know that Allison and Darcy really like each other. But for Grimm, who can't really see things for what they are, he thinks Leif and Allison are plotting to get together, and this just sends him off his rocker. He acts out, he's very rude, he cuts off his kind of like cordial behavior with Leif, and this upsets Leif because he was never trying to do anything with Allison, and it pretty much ends up with Grimm destroying what little relationship he has with Darcy and Leif, and also really ruining his relationship with Allison as he becomes meaner and crueler towards her. Not in a way that, this isn't like a fantasy, he's not gonna cut her head off, but, he just becomes a jerk. And so, at this point, it's been a few days, they're still getting calls. Leif, who is supposed to be bringing them in, is also getting calls, but at this point, he has let them know that he's found them, and he's just trying to convince them to come home. But the family is getting upset, and they want their kids to come back and be safe, and so Leif kind of ends up, he's either going to come clean, or he's going to get caught, and I haven't decided yet. Now, number 11 is supposed to be a breakup or an end to love. The protagonist hits rock bottom. So I think for this, I'm going to have Leif be caught, either messaging the family or on the phone or something similar, and Grimm will finally realize that Leif has kind of been there to watch over them and kind of get them back home. And so at this point, Leif goes with Darcy, Allison, and Grimm to the airport. They all get on the plane and they all go to their homes. And Leif kind of gets off at a different place, and they don't fix the relationship. Grimm isn't having it. Allison isn't accepting Grimm's apology. Leif tries to fix things, and Grimm won't listen. He feels very betrayed. And so they return home, and this is kind of the Beat 12 beginning to happen. At this point, things are terrible, but they're terrible because our protagonist needs to grow. And at this point, we're not really at, the all is lost anymore. We're more at the part where he starts to recognize maybe he's the problem. So here it says the protagonist reflects on their failure, but a revelation sparks hope. So we have about 20 pages where something happens and they realize that they are the problem and that they can fix it. Now, I'm not sure what I'm going to have happen here because I'm not sure that this is set in stone because it's a zero draft. It could change. But what I've decided on for now is that Grimm will contact Darcy somehow. Whether he got her number from someone's notes or maybe he got it from Allison. But he's going to contact Darcy and basically find out that Darcy does not have a great past going on. She's lost her job, she doesn't have a family, and she misses Allison, and basically kind of laments that that week of crazy was kind of the best week of her life. And Grimm, once he kind of is done with that conversation, reflects and realizes he feels the same. He feels lost, he feels unfulfilled, and he misses kind of that time. And so for Beat 13, we have a final plan emerges to confront the antagonist. For a romance novel, this is a grand gesture or a decision to win love back. I was unsure how to approach this at first, due to the fact that at first I thought, well, let's have this almost like cat and mouse chase where they do the same thing they did at the beginning, so the bookend trope, and they kind of trick Leif into chasing them down again, only to find out that actually they were just faking it to get him to come find them. And I just felt like that was cheap and it wasn't exciting and I didn't like it very much. So instead, I got rid of that and decided, what if Leif took what he learned that week and ran with it? His character arc was that he didn't enjoy his life. He didn't enjoy what was going on. He didn't enjoy his job, and he knew what he wanted. He was just unsure, unwilling of how to go and get it. And so I thought, let's make this be like Leif's big arc and have, instead of what normally happens, which is the female protagonist is usually chased down by the, male love interest that has changed their ways or does some big show. I thought, let's kind of flip that on its head. And instead, Grimm, he's learned that he needs to be vulnerable. He needs to change his ways. And so let's have him do all the growth here. There doesn't need to be any, magical, oh, here I am, Leif, love me. I wanted there to be an actual growth arc for him. And so the first thing that Grimm has to do is he has to figure out how to apologize to Allison, first of all, and also how to move forward. And here you can see I'm doing a lot of thinking, which, if you're paying attention to the timestamps and are still here, I hope, we are 40 minutes in and we are almost done. We only have 3 more beats to fill out. So at this point we are, again, doing the grand gesture or the decision to win love back. I went with a decision to win love back. And how this basically evens out is that we know that Grimm already had contact with Darcy. So he basically apologizes to Allison, admits he was wrong, and Allison and Darcy connect very quickly. However, no one can seem to get in contact with Leif. Darcy's number that she had for him isn't working, and his family knows Leif, and he has yet to admit to them why he is so depressed. And so his decision to win love back helps him become vulnerable to his family and admit that he likes Leif and that he needs their help and that he wants to get in contact, which helps him figure out for the finale, which is love triumphs with the couple reuniting, or the climax where the protagonist faces their greatest challenges and changes, is his parents do know where Leif is because they contact his parents. And Grimm finds out that Leif is working in a small, non-security job. He's left his family firm for a little bit of a break, and he's doing what he wished that he had done before. He's living kind of a normal life. And when Grimm finds him, he has changed as a character, and he is deciding in that moment whether or not he is going to go through with his declaration of love, because if he does go through with it, he could ruin things for Leif. He could be the reason that Leif returns to his family security firm. He could be ruining his own life. He could be messing up all this academic schooling that he's gone for in order to try to choose a different life with Leif. And he really takes a minute to decide on if he's still going to do this. And he takes some time to basically think about it, and he decides to kind of do research. So this is kind of the fun part where he kind of does a little montage of asking around, who is this guy? Do you guys know him? And he basically finds out that the community loves Leif. They think he's nice, they think he's useful, they think he's good for the community. And while Grimm is lamenting this, because for him it feels like he is losing Leif, he basically runs into what I'm going to call mentors, which is an older gay couple that he's going to meet while he's there, that kind of convince him that life isn't just about being comfortable. If you want things to work out, you have to try and be vulnerable and make big decisions. And they also kind of let him know that it isn't right of him to not give Leif a chance to make a decision. And so Grimm decides he is going to try to contact Leif. And so here we have the finale, the climax where the protagonist faces their greatest challenge and change, and then it says love triumphs with the couple reuniting. Now, I decided that instead of him finding Leif at work where he was going to make his grand gesture, he's not there. And so Grimm basically comes back to his room defeated because he's scared that Leif has already left, or that something has happened, or that he just went back home. And he's surprised basically to find Leif waiting for him at the inn, because Grimm is always silly and always missing the obvious, and the community loves Leif. They've let him know that there's this guy asking questions and curious about him, and Leif immediately knows who it is and just kind of lets Grimm figure these things out. He doesn't approach him, he doesn't try to change his mind, he lets Grimm figure it out. And so we now have our final image, which is the final pages, show the protagonist's new life or the story's lasting impact. For a romance, it should be a happy ending or a peaceful reconciliation. For my story, they handle their business, they get their happily ever after, and Grimm decides that if he can be with Leif, then he can go on into his boring academic life. However, the book ends with his parents telling him that there's more to what he's been learning than what he believes, and it opens the door for a sequel where his family basically keeps up with occult artifacts that are not safe for museums. And the reason that their family and Leif's family are connected is because Leif's family handles arcane and occult artifacts that need to be shipped from place to place. Whether or not Leif knows this about his family's business is still up for grabs or debate. I haven't decided yet. We're at the 45-minute mark, and the last 10 minutes of this video, I decide that I want to get more information to try to fill out the zerodraft better when I do go into details. And so I actually use the AI feature on Notion to come up with questions that I should be asking myself based on my sentence that I made and the Save the Cat beat that I am writing it for. The first time that I try it, it kind of reads the different genres in the column and gives me some weird questions, like it refers to them as heroes or wizards, and so I realized that the custom prompt was reading strangely, and I've included it on the screen, so you're free to copy that and use it. And so after I fill all these in, because the first few look fine, they don't seem strange at all, and I think it will be really helpful to me to ask myself these questions as I create characters. But what happens is I actually fill out all the columns. Then when I look and realize that some of them have strange wording, I go ahead and delete out the genres that I'm not working for on the in short column and only leave the bolded title, the definition of that beat, and the genre that I'm in. That way the questions are more targeted. I quickly find out that I have messed up. So I sped through all this so that you wouldn't have to watch it, but I edited all of the insert columns to only have that amount of information and then went back and reran the same prompt in the AI generator, and it came up with questions that actually matched the romance genre that I should be asking myself, like character arcs, emotional arcs. How does this plotline affect the character's growth later on? Am I including foreshadowing? Anything like that? And now we're actually at the end of the video. As these values update on the screen, I'd love for you to comment down below how far you got. Are you already writing a zerodraft? Have you written one before? Is there anything that you would change about this? It was a real-time zerodraft with me. I hope that it helped and it gave you some inspiration for your own novel. I do hope that I will be able to continue writing on this in the future beyond just a zerodraft. And if there's any videos that you would like from me or templates that you would like me to create, let me know. I am excited to hear what you guys are writing. If you're doing arcs or anything like that, I would love to be a part of reading an arc, beta reading, alpha reading. I already read fan fiction like crazy, so I'd love to read about your original characters. If you have any questions, any comments, or if you notice something that I just did crazy in here, let me know. Feel free to comment an emoji. I feel like it should be a plant emoji or an autumn leaf emoji because this is very much a nature story, and I will see you in the next video. Alright, bye-bye!